We want to check in with Captain Chuck Nash, who's at our screenwriter tonight, standing by in our war set. Chuck, let's do a little chalk talk about downtown Baghdad, what areas we control. When I say we, coalition forces control, and also point out that we know where Rick Leventhal is, we know he's in the eastern part of the city, and we got Greg Kelly over in the western part of the city. Talk about what they're doing, what each side of the river is doing right now.
Okay, absolutely, Brian. Let's jump to the screenwriter and we'll diagram that out. What we've got around Baghdad is the Marines have been moving in from the east, and as you were speaking with the embedded reporters, each is doing a different thing. We've got one guy doing actual foot patrols, walking through Baghdad, which is pretty amazing, especially since he's telling us all about it on the cell phone as he does it. Over to the west, Greg Kelly came in with the 3rd Infantry, and they have moved from the airport over into this area. So we have, if you want to split the city in half, we've got the Marines on the east side, and the west side boys are the Army. Now what that looks like from an overhead image is just like this. The Marines coming in from this direction. The Marines have also come up from the southeast and recently took an airfield, the Rashid Airfield, down to the southeast, and that's where they found quite a bit of armaments.
Chuck, that's a pretty significant airfield, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's a military airfield, fairly good size, nice facilities. That'll make a nice addition to U.S. forces as we move up in supply. We'll be probably stationing equipment there, and that's also where they found some uniforms that had some blood on them, and they were U.S. uniforms. In particular, they found the chem gear of 2 of the POWs. So right now we've got 7 POWs, 10 missing in action, and that includes the 2 aircrew from the F-15 that went down on Sunday, but was just recently announced because they were doing the combat SAR, search and rescue, and they didn't want to put that information out any earlier than they had to. By the way, an update on the F-18 pilot that's missing. He is still missing, but they have recovered and located his downed aircraft. But back to the Baghdad city overhead. One of the other things that was recently discovered right up in this area is the parade ground and their tomb of their unknown soldier. Just above that area, this area right here, is an amusement park and a zoo. When our forces went in there, what they found were hundreds of artillery pieces and anti-aircraft guns. So did a little house cleaning right there. In the meantime, the 3rd Infantry Division has stationed armor around this portion of Baghdad, what's called the west side of the river here, and made a couple of runs on a couple of bridges here, these 2 right there. Now this is where, this little dot that I'm drawing, is where the Palestine Meridian Hotel is. So there's been activity on that side. That's where the guy now known as Baghdad Bob is giving his press conferences, which, by the way, his press conferences don't recognize any of those symbols that I put on the chart. So he's got his own, he's got his own vision of reality, and unfortunately it is being carried on some of the Arab networks as truth, but it's far from it.
Chuck, let me ask you another question. We are beginning to get some reports, a little bit more detail. Apparently, it is astonishing how many tunnels are underneath the city of Baghdad. Virtually every presidential palace has tunnels that lead to some other building. It's like there's a whole rat's maze underneath this city that we knew it was there, but we're beginning to find out it's much more elaborate than we might have first suspected.
Absolutely, and that's also adding, Brian, to some of the concern and doubt, quite frankly, about did we get Saddam Hussein or not, because he went into a building, and there's actually a if we go back to the screenwriter, there's an area of Baghdad that's in this little red trapezoid. However, when you zoom in on it, it just so happens that there was a subway line, an underground rail line that was built that runs right along here and goes up. This is the train station. But not only are there tunnels in the presidential mansions and palaces, but because of the tunneling activity, some of which they're not really sure of how extensive this was. If you take a look at all those buildings, you know, you could drop down, and Baghdad turns out to be riddled with a lot of these things because the subway system crossed the river and went up and out into the burbs. So you put houses on all those things. Take a look at that housing density just from this satellite photograph, and you could see that you could dig down into a lot of these tunnel complexes as well as the palaces, and go into a building, have someone see you go into a building. 45 minutes later, the building vanishes, and you didn't walk out. Well, the question is, did you get out some other way? And that is where, you know, our folks are saying, yeah, they did, but as you pointed out at the top of last hour, British intelligence sources are saying in open source that no, he did get out. So that's going to be kicked around for a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Chuck Nash, thank you so much from our screenwriter. We appreciate it. Let's go back up now to New York City and my colleague, Lori Dew.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian and Captain Nash. And joining me here on the set once again is Colonel David Hunt, Fox News military analyst. Let's look ahead 30 days, okay? Let's just suppose for a moment that we get the peace, and it looks like we will get the peace. Let's go ahead a month from now. Once we have the peace, how do we maintain it, particularly in a region where there is so much volatility?
You're going to keep the special forces there because that's one of the things they do very well. And we're going to have to create an infrastructure of police and judicial systems. We're also going to probably bring in some Iraqi citizens from the United States. These people lived here for a long time, and bring them over to help. They've seen this country, they've seen what freedom is, and we use them, get language skills, a lot of them. We're going to need NGOs, not non-governmental organizations, the UNHCR, UN High Commissioner for Refugees, because they're fabulous at bringing in supplies. And we want to get the military as quickly as possible away. We want to create an atmosphere in which we're helping them without guns. So that keeping the peace will be as hard, if not harder, than this fight. It's because it's so delicate.
What about the reaction in the Arab world? What about Syria and Iran? That's a big question.
Yeah, Syria. I think it's Hamas, which Syria, and Hezbollah in Iran, and that's state-sponsored terrorism. We've got to get them to stop it. We don't have to invade them, but they got to know it's going to end. We're here in the Middle East, and that they've got to stop providing terrorism.
You know,
supporting terrorism.
Experts say that the only thing the Arab world understands is power and strength.
Absolutely.
And what we have shown in the last 2.5, 3 weeks is power and strength. That, you know, if you're going to cause terror, if you're going to disrupt the world, we're going to get you.
But this is brute force terror by power. There are other parts of power like controlling their banks, influencing their economy. There are other ways of getting at control without having to invade them. This is but we could have the hammer. It's sitting outside their country. That we got to use this to influence these countries to stop state-sponsored terrorism.
You talked about the importance of bringing Americans or Iraqis who might be living in America now who've become American citizens, taking them back over there. We heard Brian Wilson and Mark Ginsburg mention Ahmed Chalabi. He is one of the many leaders of one of the many opposition forces who is a Chicago businessman. How significant is it that he has been brought in at this time to Iraq?
It's very significant because, first of all, he's brought in by American military aircraft, and that shows we're supporting this guy. He's very controversial. He's worked in our intelligence community. He's been very good in places, but there are other parts, like the parts of State Department and parts of CIA, who don't like this guy. So it shows that we've decided he's our guy. We brought him in, and he's going to help the transition. Chalabi's very influential. He'll be a power broker and the behind-the-scene guy. He does not want to be president. He's important, and it's important for him that we brought him in militarily.
Why wouldn't he want to be president?
Because Chalabi, his personality is he wants to influence the president. He wants to be a kingmaker, not the king. And there's money involved. There's a lot of things, but he's been around many years to try to get what's happening now. He doesn't want to interfere with it. But it's a big deal that he's on the ground with, by the way, Iraqi National Congress soldiers with weapons. So we brought in the beginnings of this police force that we've talked about.
Speaking of terrorists, and when we're talking about Syria and Iran and Hezbollah, other terrorist groups, Osama bin Laden, we heard from him today. We don't know when this tape was made, but a tape was made in which he made another call to jihad. He named the various governments that he wants to bring down. It's nothing new, but to me, it's just another demonstration of what we know now, that are the links between Al-Qaeda and Saddam. What did you make of this tape today?
Well, I made out the pain in the butt that he showed up again. Here we are doing this great stuff in Iraq. It reminds everybody that terrorism is not going to go away, that UBL is still around. It did a great job in Afghanistan, but it's a symbol. And you don't like symbols in terrorism. And it reminds us that we've got to get Hussein. We don't want to create another symbol. And that the battle against terrorism we're a long way from finishing it. UBL is probably not directly advising Al-Qaeda, running it, but his influence is everywhere, and he's a symbol. We want to get him out of that symbol. And it's interesting that he would come out with this now. He wants to get a little publicity. It's a pain in the butt to have him come out with that, because we want to concentrate in Iraq and get this done. We don't want to be reminded this guy's still around.
Well, speaking of someone who may still be around, that is Saddam Hussein. We don't know at this hour whether he's dead or alive. There's no proof proving that he is alive. If he's not in Baghdad, where would he be? What about the chances of him going to his hometown of Tikrit?
More than likely Syria, than Tikrit, because he knows we're going after Kirk. They're going after his hometown. They're outside it now. But there's such a labyrinth underneath that city. He's 30 years in living there and surviving. I truly believe that guy's still around in Baghdad, and we've got him walled in. But there's always that outside chance, and you have to consider it, that he could be where you're suggesting, or it could actually be in Syria. But I'm betting that he's in Baghdad, and we got him.
But if he is in this labyrinthine part of tunnels, it could be really hard to find him.
Yep, you bet.
Okay. All right, Colonel Hunt, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you a little later. But now let's go back to Brian in Washington.
All right, thank you much. We want to check in with Rick Leventhal, one of our embedded reporters. You may have noticed he's changed groups that he's with. He's still with the Marines. It was the 1st Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. And earlier today, he was walking with these Marines, about 100 of them, through the streets of East Baghdad. Their goal, an insane goal, to draw fire. He's with us now on the video phone. Rick, what's the latest?
Brian, some low-tech dismantling of some anti-aircraft weaponry behind me. You may be able to see, we are on a video phone, so it's going to be a little jerky, but you may be able to see some Marines with the 223. They've got sledgehammers. They've been pounding away at this anti-aircraft weapon to try and dismantle it. They may actually blow it up later, but right now they just want to make sure it can't be used against coalition forces. There are at least half a dozen of these anti-aircraft weapons in this one area that we're standing in right now in East Baghdad. We're east of the heart of the city. There are, I don't know, more than 100, a couple hundred Marines out here fanned out across the area. They're doing an urban patrol. They're trying to draw fire. They're looking for the enemy. They want the enemy to engage so that they can find where the enemy is and kill them. We have heard sporadic gunfire out here. I'm being told now that most or all of that gunfire is from the Marines shooting at men that they're seeing running house to house to try and avoid detection. They are patrolling these streets. They're looking for trouble, and I guess in some cases they're finding it. I want to bring in Corporal Jason McCall. He is a reservist, as is almost your entire battalion out here, reservists, the only Marine infantry reservists in the war. You told me you work for an armored truck company when you're not...
Yes, Armored Transport in Oakland.
Must be a pretty big difference for you to be out here in Iraq.
Oh, definitely. I'd only been working at Armored for like 6 months. I just gotten off active duty in 2000.
Yeah. Well, describe this experience. How has it been so far?
It's been interesting. It's different. We took a while to get into the action, but now that we found it and we know where it's at, we're just going to work with it.
Did you ever say to yourself, what the heck am I doing out here, when they start shooting at you?
I mean, I know why we're here. I know what we're doing. And me from active duty, I every day for 4 years, I assumed I was going to go. I just never knew I'd come to the reserves and end up being here. I always thought I'd be on active duty.
Is that a good thing, though? Are you happy that you're finally seeing some combat?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's why I joined. I mean, I didn't join to be in an office and, you know.
This thing has gotten rather ugly with not organized armies that you're facing, but guerrilla tactics, exactly. Must be harder for you guys to fight this war.
Well, it is, because we're going into their backyard and into their towns, and they know where to go, and we're trying to find them. I mean, they know all the little nooks and crannies and where to hide and the little mouse holes they can shoot from in the windows and the shadows.
Is this a war that you are confident you can win now and win quickly?
No, definitely. Without a doubt in my mind.
Well, that's good news for all of us. The hunt for fighters continues out here. Brian?
Rick, talk to me about how far you have been hiking today, because you called in about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, and you were marching through the neighborhoods of East Baghdad then. How far are you from your base of operation?
I'd say we traveled, a couple clicks, you think? Yeah, about 2 kilometers. The beginning of it was the roughest because at some point someone yelled double time and we started running down the street, and we're wearing these very heavy bulletproof vests and carrying some gear, and it was very, very early in the morning. And we also had artillery firing. The Marines were firing artillery from behind us over our heads, hitting targets ahead of us. Since then, we have had some time to catch our breath, and right now we're in this sort of construction area. And again, the activity here has been limited mostly to dismantling some anti-aircraft weapons, and also there is some door-to-door activity going on in some of these abandoned buildings. And as I mentioned, there is some shooting going on. But this kind of activity will continue.
That's important when you find a piece of equipment like the one we see behind you, to take it out so that it can't be used against you at a later time.
Exactly, and it's one of the things that the 3rd LAR was doing, the Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion was doing when we were embedded with them. They were coming across all sorts of anti-aircraft weaponry, armored personnel carriers, tanks. One day, one of the companies disabled 18 of the armored personnel carriers. They were not occupied at the time, but they were destroyed. As you mentioned, it's very important to destroy the tanks and also the munitions that they're finding. These guys have found large caches of munitions in their searches. And they are destroying that stuff so that when the Iraqis or whoever's trying to use it comes back to get it, it's not there anymore. The more stuff they get rid of, the less stuff that can be used against them. And that's a primary goal of the 223.
Rick, I want you to, if you can, have your cameraman pan around and let us see the kinds of areas in which you're operating.
Okay, I wanted to, I guess we can do that. I didn't lose a connection there. Okay, this is, you can see some of the you may be able to see some of the anti-aircraft weapons behind me. It's sort of an empty area. It's a construction site, if you will. There are several of these anti-aircraft guns on wheels parked in the middle of this sort of field-like area. We passed through a very urban environment to get here, and in fact, some of the homes that we saw were very nice homes behind walls. They looked like they were well constructed. There were a lot of people in many of these houses who were watching us go by. A lot of them were waving at us. We also passed through some more urban environments that were perhaps not as nice, with apartments and that sort of thing. This area looks like it is intended to be a pretty nice development. These are large homes that are being built here, but apparently they're being used in some cases by soldiers and Ba'ath Party loyalists and Fedayeen. They're hiding out here and perhaps using some of these as perches for snipers.
And that's been a concern, that the military or the Fedayeen would take over individual homes and hide there and look like regular residents, and you not know it.
Yeah, and Corporal, are you seeing a lot of that, where the opposition is using private homes to protect their actions, the snipers?
I believe so. When they see us coming down the streets, I'm sure they hide in one house, and once you bypass that house, they'll go to the next one, and then once you've already passed that, they'll go back, because they know it's already been cleared.
We saw a lot of uniforms in the street, Brian, and the colonel this morning or last night told me that, in fact, that is their intel, that these guys are taking off their uniforms and leaving them in the street or wherever, but they're not dropping their guns, and they are shooting at them. So the best the Marines can do is look for people with weapons. People that don't have weapons, they're not going to shoot at them, obviously, but if they do, they will. And the best indication that someone is an enemy at this point, since they're not wearing uniforms, is if they have a weapon.
Rick, tell me what you must be going through your mind right now when you think about the task that you have at hand. The task is basically walk down the street and see if you can get people to shoot at you. That's kind of insane, Rick.
Yeah. It does sound insane. And when we first switched units, our impression was that we would probably be in an armored personnel carrier of some kind, possibly even a tank of some kind. And of course, here we are walking down the street, completely defenseless. It's a little unsettling. And there's no two ways around it. Christian and I, our photographer Christian Galdabini, who I know you know well because he works out of the D.C. Bureau, just looked at me and shook his head like, what are we doing here? This is crazy. But it's part of the job, and we are with some, I hope, good shots. Yeah.
I'm low marksman.
Low marksman, great. But some of these guys, at least some of them are good marksmen, so we hope that if trouble comes, and it has been coming, that we'll be well protected.
One of the things you talked about earlier, Rick, was the fact that many of the people you're with are reservists. That is not uncommon, I'm told. There are other reserve units that are doing this kind of work. But what is the mood of these people? I mean, one day they're working at Sears, they're working for armored personnel companies or armored truck companies, and the next day they're on a plane headed to the deserts of Kuwait and moved on into Iraq.
Brian wants to know the mood, like you go from your day job. What is your day job?
I'm a registered nurse back home in Alabama.
Okay. And your full name?
Ray Dunn.
And your rank?
I'm an HM2, a corpsman for the Marines.
You're a corpsman. And you're a registered nurse, normally helping people back home in Alabama. Now here you are potentially helping fellow Marines. How does that feel for you?
It's a job that we prepare for in the reserves. It's something that we, look forward to doing out here, helping some of the townspeople when we have a chance to, and definitely we're looking to not have any casualties on our side.
But there have been some. I know that there were 9 in with Fox Company.
Correct.
Yesterday. That brings it all home, I would imagine.
Absolutely. When we have casualties with some of the fellow companies, a lot of these guys know them, and it hits a little closer to home. But we've been very fortunate, very blessed to be protected from that and go down the right streets, I guess.
Have you personally had to administer first aid yet?
Just a couple of guys. We had one of the guys earlier that had some first aid that needed to be done, but nothing serious. Everything's little minor bumps and bruises, ankle sprains, typical things that we get when we go on any evolution.
Are you gung-ho?
We're ready to go. There's no doubt. We're definitely in a war battlefield, and we have to keep our eyes open and our ears open, and have the sixth sense working for us, and we're ready.
I've heard of some Marines, I'm not saying you're one of them, who join up, hope never to see action. They hope to just do their time and get out. Do you feel like you're surrounded by those kinds of Marines, or you got the guys who are just couldn't wait to get here?
There's a small percentage of the population of any branch of the service that mainly goes for the education. These guys here, there's a lot of Marines that have spent a lot of time on the reserve side. Most have done active duty time as well as myself. I've got 15 years in. If I was here just for the education or just for spending time and getting a little extra money, then I would have been out by now.
All right, Corpsman, thanks so much for joining us. Brian, you have a question or you got to run?
Actually, I think we just missed our opportunity to run, so I'm going to hand it over to Lori Dew. She's dying to get in here and ask you some questions. Rick,
okay.
Again, some tremendous work on your part.
All right.
And be very careful. Keep your head down. Lori, take over for a little while.
All right, I sure will. Rick, thanks for
Thank you.
sticking around with us. We appreciate it. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Okay, great. We're going to get to some comments about your helmet in just a second, but first let me ask you this.
Yeah, it's stylish.
Oh,
isn't
it is
I'm
really
styling.
styling. Yeah, Colonel Hunt and I are agreeing that
Yeah.
you might need a
Yeah.
new size or something. But anyway, on
Yeah, that's pretty low. I'm all the way over here, just sweating and
we're picking
living
on
in
his helmet.
dirt.
You know we do
and you
this.
guys are making fun of my helmet. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
I am ashamed of myself, and so is Colonel Hunt.
No, I'm not ashamed of myself at all.
Or he says he's not.
He's a star. You look at him, he's a star. You got a helmet that doesn't fit, you got a wrong color.
It's better than a floppy hat if I get.
No, the
If
floppy
I
hat
get
was
shot,
you.
it's better than a floppy hat.
Floppy
right?
hat was you.
You know,
Yeah, well, I'll put it back on.
Rick, all kidding aside, God, buddy, you're really doing something pretty dangerous right now. But what you and the guys are doing there is also historic, and I would assume that it's not lost on them that for the first time in recent history, you're seeing the first Marine reservists there in infantry.
Yeah, well, you guys feel like you're making history out here since you are reservists, and I know there were reservists in Gulf War I, but you're the only reservist, the only infantry reservist out here. How does that sit with you?
It was pretty good. I was told before I joined this unit that it was a good unit by one of the fellow Marines. He said it was a good unit, and that well, I didn't expect to come here at that time, but it's good. I feel secure with them and safe.
To put that in perspective, I was told there were 9 Marine infantry battalions, and yours is the only one that's been activated for this duty.
On the reserve side,
Yeah.
I believe so. Is that correct, son?
And you guys have been active for 16 months now, approximately, right?
Well, we did a year Homeland Defense back in the States at Camp Pendleton and Camp Horno, and it said we'd be there for a year with a possible 12-month extension. And after that year that we were in Horno, this came up.
It's amazing to me because a lot of reservists never do serve more than a weekend a month or 2 weekends a month that they do, and here you are 16 months into it, and now you're at war and you're still going strong.
Definitely. Like I said, the morale's good, and a lot of them wanted to be here. So they've had a whole year to get ready for it. We've been doing all sorts of training, so they feel pretty secure and pretty.
And now they're right up front, Lori. They're right up front.
And I know this is such a trite question, but how are they doing? They do look. Rick?
How are you doing?
Yeah,
Johnson?
I mean,
I'm doing good.
Are they fired
Say
up?
hi to Lori Do.
Yes, I do. Hey, Lori.
Here we go.
How you doing? Spent a lot of time watching you, and you have a very pretty smile.
You got some fans out here, Lori. Her office is right next door to mine.
You're a lucky guy.
Yes, I am.
Well,
Are you enjoying your time at war?
No,
No?
I'd rather be at home.
What would you be doing if you were at home?
I go to school at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo,
What are you studying?
political science.
Did you suspect that this might happen? Did you have any say in the matter?
No, not at all.
So you're anxious to get back?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going back to school, and I'm sure in hindsight this will be a positive experience, but right now, just looking for a shower and a hot rack.
Yeah, you're not enjoying this at all?
No.
All right. Well, you want to pass a message along to Lori before I let you go?
Phone number. Yeah. Phone number, please.
All right, there you go. Well, by the way, what was that we just heard? Was that artillery, do you think? Yeah, some artillery. We've been hearing that throughout the day, but haven't heard any gunfire in a while, and that's probably a good thing.
I would say that's very definitely a good thing, Rick
siren,
Leventhal.
too.
Jeez, right. Good grief. Hard to believe that these guys are just, regular old American teenagers or guys in their early 20s who work at Sears or go to Cal Poly and they just have, regular old lives. But, Rick, thank you as always for taking the time to give us some
there
more.
Are actually, how many?
Go ahead.
I heard there was, I think, 17 police officers from the LAPD, at least 17. Some from Vegas. Are you Beverly Hills? No, come here. Are you really?
Yeah, he is.
Hey, come here. This guy's a police officer in Beverly Hills.
Well, he's a long way from Beverly Hills,
Can you give
isn't
us
he?
your full name and rank?
Major Tom West.
Major Tom West. You're a long way from Beverly Hills, says Lori Do.
Yes, I am.
You get people shooting at you in Beverly Hills? I'm guessing not.
Not yet. Hasn't happened.
Yeah, but what about here?
It's been happening a lot, I guess. But there's nothing real serious, nothing you can really do about it except.
What did the guys in the department back in Beverly Hills say when you said, "Hey, I guess what? I'm going off to Iraq"?
Pretty much sucks for you. No, no. I got a lot of support from the department. It was really great. The chief took care of me, and
Meaning your salary?
absolutely, yeah.
Hey, Rick?
They went overboard, rolled out the red carpet, and
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Rick, I've got a quick question for the guy you're talking to there. Does he have family? And if so, what was his family's reaction when he went over there? Maybe he got the support of the police chief, but what about his family?
What about your family? Did you get support from them, or what was their reaction?
I have a daughter. She was stressed out, but
How old is she?
she's going to be 9 soon.
Yeah.
In July, actually. But they're doing great. My parents, my family's doing really good. So.
Have you talked to them at all?
No, I got a letter dated the 15th of March a couple of days ago, so the mail's been slow. But I've been on deployment before, so they understand. And hopefully this thing will be over soon. So.
Yeah, and then you go back to being a cop in Beverly Hills?
Yep.
Now listen, if I come speeding through Beverly Hills, you gonna remember me? And
Stand by.
Oh, wow.
Come on now. Yeah, you gonna give me a get out of jail free card?
We'll see.
I'm trying to collect them, by the way. Huh?
It depends how things are going at the coffee bean.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks for helping protect us out here.
problem.
All right. You're a good shot?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to stay next to this guy.
Yeah, I want you to stand
Yeah?
next to the
All
good
right.
marksman out there, Rick. I mean, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm joking, but, you know, it is a little unsettling, especially when we're walking down the street and we hear gunfire. We don't know where it's coming from.
No. Rick, I'm afraid we're going to have to
What's
let
that?
you go for now.
Yeah,
We're
go
coming
ahead.
up against a hard break here, but Rick Leventhal, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you later. Let's go back to you,
Okay.
Brian, in Washington.
Yeah, Rick, if you're there real quick, you say you're getting, in some quarters, a pretty nice reception from the locals?
Yeah, we have been. Everybody waves at us, and not everybody, but most people are waving, and a lot of people are smiling. You know, thumbs up, and some people actually speak English and say hello. But you know, the colonel is telling these guys to be careful because the guys who are waving during the daytime could be shooting at night, and I think everybody out here understands that, and it's part of the job.
All right, Rick Leventhal on the front, walking through the east side of Baghdad, where they are destroying in the background some anti-aircraft weapons. Ambassador Ginsburg is here with me, and I want to ask you a couple questions. I asked that last question of Rick because, you know, it was very important to the Bush administration going in that not only did they go in and remove Saddam Hussein, but they try to win the hearts and minds of the people of Iraq. And how do you think that effort is going thus far? I would say mixed results.
Well, mixed results going in, Brian, because first of all, most of the Iraqis that we want to liberate, remember that in 1991 we were not by their side when we encouraged them to rebel, and many of them were massacred because we didn't come to their rescue. So they're hesitant about whether or not we're going to stay long enough for them to get rid of the Ba'ath regime. And secondly, until they see Saddam's head on a stick, since he has been the symbol of the tyranny that has been inflicted on them, they're not going to be satisfied that things are going to go that well until they see him gone.
And, you know, we can go halfway around the world and put people on a video phone, but we forget to put your microphone on. I apologize for that. Where are we going, folks? Okay, we'll read this. U.S. forces continue battling Iraq soldiers in downtown Baghdad. Marines report fighting off snipers as the coalition continues to gain control of Iraq's capital city. Hello, everyone. It's 11 a.m. in Baghdad. It's 3 a.m. here on America's East Coast. I am Brian Wilson in Washington.
Hi, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Dew in New York, and you are watching Fox News Channel's continuing coverage of Operation Iraqi Freedom. You know, there has been so much going on, and just to give you a little more information than what Brian just told you a moment ago, we continue to hear from our coalition forces via Rick Leventhal, who's with the Marines, and Greg Kelly, who's with the Army, that the grip is tightening around Baghdad. The Pentagon is now claiming that the U.S. and British forces have sole ownership of all Iraqi airspace, including over the capital We've got the airspace in Tikrit, which is Saddam's hometown. And just 24 hours ago, as you will probably all remember, we heard about 8,000 pounds of ordnance that came in on this restaurant and whatever else was there with it. We were reporting that we thought it might be Saddam Hussein and his sons and some of the top leadership. We still do not have it confirmed who was inside that area when it was bombed, but the bottom line is whoever was there is not with us anymore. All right, Brian, I'm being told that we're going to go back to you in Washington now.
Yeah, just a couple of things are crossing the wire here that I think we've been meaning to get in the last few minutes, but we wanted to stay with Rick Leventhal as long as we could. First of all, remember that while we have an operation going on in Iraq, there is still a military operation going on in another theater, that being Afghanistan. And there is a bulletin that has crossed our wire here tonight saying that according to the U.S. military, this is confirmed by the U.S. military, 11 Afghan civilians have been killed by a U.S.-led coalition bombing. The details of that are a bit sketchy, but apparently it has to do with a bomb dropped by coalition aircraft landing on a house on the outskirts of Shkin near the Pakistan border. Other details are coming with that. There are still 11,500 U.S. and allied troops in Afghanistan. You know what they're doing. They're looking for Osama bin Laden still, and that operation continues to go on, but apparently something of a tragedy tonight. 11 civilians, Afghan civilians, have been killed in Afghanistan. There is another note of interest here that has to do with what's going on in northern Iraq. Unfortunately, we just don't have the cameras in northern Iraq that we have in Baghdad right now, and it tends to get short shrift, but there's a lot going on there. U.S. Special Operations troops, according to the AP, and Kurdish fighters seized a strategic hilltop near the major Baghdad-held city of Mosul in northern Iraq early Wednesday, a senior Kurdish leader said. The area is called Maklub. Does that sound familiar to you? I have with me Ambassador Mark Ginsburg. What do you know about that area?
Well, that area is just on the shelf of the mountains that are coming down towards the oil fields near Kirkuk and Mosul. And so what this is indicating is that our special forces, as well as whatever forces we have on the northern front, are beginning slowly to make their way to the perimeters of these cities.
And we really need to have a better presence in the north right now, don't we?
Well, indeed, and where the cities that are not liberated are at this point in time are the two major cities, Kirkuk and Mosul. Kirkuk being the center of the Iraqi oil installations in the north, and Mosul being the major city that separates Baghdad from Tikrit. And that's the road that we want to get down in order to get to Tikrit, which is Saddam's home city.
Ambassador Ginsburg, thank you. Let's go back to Lori Dew. I think she's got Greg Kelly ready to go right there at the presidential palace in downtown Baghdad. Lori?
Said it. There are a couple of palaces that coalition forces have taken over, including a newer one, and that's where Greg Kelly has been reporting for us for the last several hours, and he's right in front there. It's really quite extraordinary that he's just standing there on the front porch, so to speak, of one of the palaces there. Greg, we know that earlier some bombs were still falling. What are you hearing at this hour?
Hi, Lori. Sure, bombs are still falling and there's still fighting going on sporadically throughout the city. But it has lessened somewhat overall than it was about 12 hours ago, where it was fairly constant since our arrival. But for now, they're dealing with these pockets of resistance. The latest was a fairly substantial counterattack this morning. About 50 to 100 of these Special Republican Guards attempted to come over to this side of the city from the east side on boats across the Tigris River. Their movement was detected, and they were taken out by 2nd Brigade Combat Team tanks. For now, the situation seems fairly stable, despite the occasional rumbling we hear in the distance. 2nd Brigade Combat Team has important military assets like M1 tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles parked in front of an array of Iraqi governmental buildings, like the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of the Interior, as well as this palace, another palace just down the Qadisiyah Expressway, and also the parade grounds and other kind of symbolic points of interest in this town. As far as the 2nd Brigade Combat Team goes, they feel like they have accomplished a good part of their mission just by being here. It was their hope that the presence of M1 tanks and Bradleys rumbling through the town would kind of shock the Iraqi regime, whatever's left of it, into collapse. And they're still waiting for that to happen. For now, a couple of questions remain. Number one, what is Saddam Hussein's status? Commanders here really want some intelligence on that issue. We understand it may take a couple of days to verify, but they certainly want that thing put to bed. Also, they'd like to know where the Iraqi information minister is to show him once and for all that U.S. troops are, in fact, in Baghdad. Lori?
You know, speaking of that massive mound of rubble that is left there in that neighborhood called Mansour, we know that special ops are on the ground, perhaps. They're sifting through the rubble. But if you would, give us a sense of how far you are from that neighborhood.
The location that was hit is roughly 3 miles from where we're standing. And before the coalition airstrike happened, the one that apparently might have taken out Saddam Hussein, we knew it was coming. The Air Force officer came out of his vehicle and said, get ready, in 30 seconds, bombs are going to fall and they're going to be loud. And sure enough, in just under 30 seconds, we heard a massive blast. It was about 3 miles away, and that is the site that was hit. We haven't spent really any time in that area. Our efforts have been, the 2nd Brigade combat team's efforts have been focused mainly in the downtown area, those governmental points of interest, kind of like the Washington Mall, if you will. That's the kind of area we are in and that we're operating from right now. Lori?
Another Washington parallel is the fact that this palace is essentially the equivalent of the White House. That was how you actually put it earlier. And that some of the guys who went in there were sort of looking around just with their eyes peeled, couldn't believe, you know, just the opulence in there. If you would give us a sense of what the first reaction was when the guys went in there after, of course, securing the areas that might have been booby-trapped. What did they see? What was their reaction?
There was a lot of euphoria that they were actually walking around in this palace. I should point out that, you know, Saddam Hussein has roughly 11 palaces throughout the country. This is one of the main ones, but they were in awe just to be there, just to actually be walking in the corridors and in the bedrooms and in the bathrooms of Saddam Hussein. It was just a surreal experience. And once that kind of wore off, they kind of are treating it as a shelter, as a place where they can sleep, as a place where they can communicate from, relax from time to time, and possibly from time to time also pick up a couple of souvenirs. That is happening.
What are they picking up?
Nothing of any value,
Yeah.
and really there is nothing that you'd want to take home if this stuff were in a garage sale maybe. But there's some, you know, like the hi-fi stereo stuff. It's all old and not very good equipment, at least 15 years old. Nothing too impressive. You know, there have been some interest in some of the pictures of Saddam Hussein, maybe a plate or a cup, things like that. But a lot of stuff is broken, like the chandeliers, and a lot of the furniture is pretty much in ruins. And these guys really can't take home a couch or a chair with them, even if it was intact. They just don't have the room.
But very quickly, I guess that you and the other guys are sleeping on those sofas and chairs. That would be my guess.
We did the first night. We actually spent the night inside, and it was, you know, nice to be sleeping under a roof for the first time in a couple of weeks. Once you got beyond the weirdness of being in Saddam Hussein's old house, it was pretty much a normal night's rest. Some couches have found their way outside of the palace, and some of the troops are using them to catch some Z's. For us, though, we spent last night out here on the lawn, Saddam Hussein's former front lawn, because it's getting actually awfully hot in there. There's no electricity, and at night it's actually cooler outdoors than it is inside.
Just extraordinary that we're looking at the inside of Saddam Hussein's former palaces. Now they belong to the coalition. Really extraordinary. Greg Kelly with the 3rd ID of the U.S. Army. As always, we really appreciate seeing you on the air here, and we'll talk to you a bit later outside the palace. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lori.
Now let's go to Brian in Washington.
All right, thank you much, Lori. We want to talk to our military analysts who are here to give us the view of what's going on. We have with us Bill Cowan, who is a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, and Van Hipp, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army. Gentlemen, welcome. It's kind of interesting that we have a guy from the Marines and a guy from the Army, because that's really what we have in Baghdad right now. If you look at the map of Baghdad, you can run kind of a line along the Tigris River. And on the west side, the left side, you got the Army starting to take over, and on the right side of the city you have the Marines that are walking through neighborhoods and beginning to take control of that side of the city. How far are we from having real control of Baghdad? We got loosely surrounded, but don't really have much control within most of the city. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, Brian. It looks to me like we're going to go ahead and try and secure that eastern side. We know the eastern side to the east of the Tigris River is principally Shiite. That's where the Marines are operating. Clearly, they're still engaged in combat over there and may be for some time. But over on the west side of the city, which is Sunni Ba'ath Party, the real loyalists to Saddam, that's where the long-term engagements may be. The Marines may have a little bit, it's going to be a tough job, but a little bit less of a job to do as long as they're on that side. If they have to cross over and join up with the Army, with Van's people, then it's going to be maybe the tough fighting.
Bill's exactly right, and of course you've got the special forces operating on both sides of the river.
Yes.
But if you look at that eastern bank of the Tigris, no question, heavy Shiite populations, and some of the areas like Saddam City and particularly New Baghdad, upwards of 85-90% of the population is Shiite, and those are the people who, of course, over the years have distrusted Saddam the most. I do think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems that we've got right now, and we're seeing this as we have the probing missions and we encounter various pockets of resistance, is this. You've got these imported terrorists from Jordan, Egypt, and Sudan who are there in the city that we have had to encounter. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with, both the Third ID, the Marines, and the Special Forces in the city.
And how is this loose cordon that they keep talking about, that this technique that they're implying called loose cordon, how does it seem to be going thus far?
Well, probably good, Brian. We do want to let people out of the city. We're probably happy to see civilians fleeing, and they're not crossing the border into other countries. It appears they're going outside the city to find other places of refuge, maybe villages, families, friends, whatever outside. That's good. The less civilians that are inside the city, the better it is for us if indeed we have to engage. By the same token, that cordon is not going to let armed units of the Republican Guard, Special Republican Guard, or anybody else get outside that city. We like it when those guys come and engage us.
Absolutely. Keep that leadership contained in the city. Don't let them flee to the north. And also, don't let folks from the north who may want to come into the city to beef up what's left of the Republican Guard and some of the Fedayeen get in there. And that's why we've got elements of the 101st and of the 82nd deployed north of the city to prevent some of the remaining elements of the Nebuchadnezzar division, which is at Tikrit right now, from coming into the city.
I also want to ask you about this is usually the time of day where if we're going to see activity in downtown Baghdad, we see it. It was yesterday we saw the tanks trying to cross the bridge, A-10s in the air. There are all kinds of activity going on in the city. And today it seems that there's a kind of lull. What do you make of that?
A little quiet, you're right, Brian. Maybe we're taking a little chance to get a breather here, replenish our supplies once again, give these guys, they've been fighting hard, both the Marines and the 3rd Infantry Division, fighting pretty hard. Give them a little bit of a break. At the same time, allow this psychological warfare effort to continue. Let the word get out in and among the civilian population that despite what the information minister is saying, it looks like the Americans are really here. I haven't seen them, but my neighbor did because he was just down at Saddam's palace. Let that word get out.
Yeah, and there may be some things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about.
A lot of things going on behind the scenes.
Do we have any sense of what's going on?
Particularly with our special forces on the ground in Baghdad, rest assured, identifying more targets and so forth. And also, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 4th ID right now getting ready to be deployed to the north of Baghdad and getting ready to go to Tikrit. I think we have changed from what I would say a military phase that is a conventional type of warfare into what we've been talking about as a checkpoint type of warfare with this loose cordon. But don't be surprised to see the 4th ID deployed to the north and getting ready to go to Tikrit to take out the remaining part of that Nebuchadnezzar division.
All be revealed in due time, I am sure. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Meanwhile, the search continues for 2 U.S. airmen whose F-15 fighter jet crashed near the city of Tikrit on Monday. Fox News correspondent David Lee Miller joins us live from U.S. Central Command headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Hello, David Lee.
Good morning, Brian. CENTCOM is not releasing a great deal of new information about what happened. They're still looking, as you said, for those 2 airmen that were aboard the F-15E strike aircraft. It is believed that that plane that was downed may very well have gone down somewhere behind enemy lines in an area that is in fact controlled by the regime. As for the men, we can only tell you that they are from the Seymour Johnson Air Base in North Carolina. As for the cause of this incident, that is also under investigation. We do not know at this hour whether this was enemy fire or a mechanical problem. This incident, by the way, happened on Sunday, but CENTCOM is only releasing the details now. Of course, they did not want to release it any earlier, anything that might endanger the 2 men who are still being sought. Now, we are getting word this morning of a successful search and rescue that took place on Monday, about 48 hours ago. This just south of Baghdad. Apparently, 2 Special Operations Forces soldiers were critically wounded. A search and rescue team was sent out, and the men were airlifted safely. They are now in a hospital in Kuwait. They were, as I said, critically wounded, but because of this very successful airlift, CENTCOM says they stand now a 95% chance of survival. And time again here at CENTCOM, we have heard, Brian, that this is a conflict not about one man, but about a regime change. But nevertheless, the world anxiously awaits word on the fate of Saddam Hussein. And again, this morning, CENTCOM officials are only saying that they had very good intelligence when they launched that airstrike a little more than 24 hours ago in the Mansour district, but there is no confirmation one way or the other as to whether or not Saddam Hussein survived. There are some interesting reports, though, coming out of London. A number of different newspapers there have talked with anonymous sources, they say, associated with the military intelligence there. One of the papers, the Daily Telegraph, quotes an unnamed intelligence officer as saying, and I quote again, "We just missed him." Another paper, The Guardian, says, and I quote again, "He was probably not in the building at the time it was bombed." And the London Times is also saying now that it is believed before the bombing took place, Saddam left that building, possibly, they say, by using an underground tunnel. And finally now, a story that's getting a great deal of attention here in Doha, Qatar, is the death of an Al Jazeera correspondent, Tariq Ayoub. The Al Jazeera network is based here in Qatar, and yesterday evening there was a news conference here. In attendance was the satellite channel's chairman, Sheikh Hamid bin Thamar Al Thani. He said there was no provocation for the attack, but he also added it is not possible at this time to determine whether this airstrike was deliberate. Yesterday, I don't know if you heard it, but CENTCOM said that the reason the Al Jazeera studios and facilities were struck in Baghdad is because there was enemy fire coming from that building, and the coalition was only exercising its inherent right of self-defense. Nevertheless, this remains a very contentious point here for the Al Jazeera network, and I expect that we may hear more about this later today during the daily news briefing. For now, that's the latest from Doha. Back to you.
And I must add a point of personal loss for you, David Lee Miller, because I know you knew the journalist who was killed the other day, and our sympathies to you and to the colleagues and the friends and the family of the colleagues that was lost. Let's go back to Lori Dew in New York. Thank you, David Lee.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more with Colonel Dick Esau, who is U.S. Marine Corps retired. He joins me here on the set. 28 years in the Marine Corps. You were also the former commanding officer of the 3rd Marine Regiment, so we wanted to point that out. And we want to let our viewers know that we are awaiting a news conference with British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw and the French Foreign Affairs Minister. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But first to you. We are hearing from our embedded reporters Greg Kelly and Rick Leventhal that there are still pockets of resistance there in Baghdad. What about the possibility of letting enemy soldiers who we have captured deal with those pockets of resistance?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, because today I was thinking about what we would do with the expatriate, Iraqis, the ones who came to the United States and have lived there for a period of time and are now back in country. Why couldn't they, be the leaders of these people who really don't want to live under Saddam Hussein or anything to do with Saddam Hussein, and let them lead these people against these pockets of resistance? Let them clear out their own country instead of putting our people, out there on the street.
Colonel, this news conference is happening. Let's stand by. Let's go now to Paris, where British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw is speaking. Let's listen.
Indeed, for your hospitality here this morning. And we've had, as you've already indicated, a great agenda for our discussions. I was able to brief the Minister about the outcome of the discussions which took place on Monday and Tuesday at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland between President Bush and Prime Minister Blair, US Secretary of State Powell and myself on the issue of Iraq, the Middle East and Northern Ireland. You will be familiar with the statements that were made at the end of those discussions, so I won't repeat them at length, except to draw your attention to the fact that both the Prime Minister and President Bush committed themselves to a, quote, vital role for the United Nations in the reconstruction of Iraq and other matters relating to Iraq as well. We all hope desperately that the conflict comes to an end. It looks as though we may be towards the close of hostilities. None of us want the blood of a single individual shed at all in this situation. We want the conflict to come to an end. We want the removal of Saddam Hussein's government, and we want, as this is happening, to begin the process of rehabilitation, redevelopment and reconstruction of Iraq, and the encouragement of a representative and then a democratic system of government inside Iraq. Again, what was emphatic yesterday at Hillsborough was that the government of Iraq, of the people of Iraq, has to be from the people of Iraq and by the people of Iraq, of course with the support of the coalition and with the support of the United Nations and the international community. On the Middle East, good progress was made yesterday. Dominique was saying to me upstairs, and I agree with him, that the thing that has caused the greatest degree of anger in the Arab and Islamic world has not actually been Iraq, but it's been this profound sense of injustice felt by the Palestinians, and the vicious circle as the huge insecurity from terrorism felt in Israel by the Israelis then to say develops a vicious circle in which the sense of injustice gets worse and worse. And if there is a single issue in the world in which, for the stability of the world as well as the future of those people, we have to deal with, it is on the Middle East. And France and we have worked very collaboratively together, and I would like to commend Dominique and his president for all their work to getting the peace process going and the very constructive role which France has played inside the quartet. Yesterday, President Bush repeated what he'd said at Camp David, that he was going to publish the roadmap once Abu Mazen's cabinet was in place, and was then fully committed to its implementation. And significantly, yesterday, President Bush also said that he was going to devote the same energy to the Middle East peace process as Prime Minister Blair has devoted to the Northern Ireland peace process. Well, I have to say, from an entirely impartial stand, that the energy that Prime Minister Blair has devoted to the Northern Ireland process has been huge, and it's an energy which is now producing dividends, so we look forward to its conclusion. As we also, yesterday at Hillsborough, discussed the Northern Ireland process, it's in a sense something which is internal inside the British Isles for the United Kingdom and for the Republic of Ireland, but it has huge resonance across the world. And a point that President Bush made was that if the parties can now move from a peace process to a peace outcome in Northern Ireland, that will send a really important message to other theatres of conflict where people have tried to resolve their arguments by killing each other, to show them that it's possible to resolve them by peaceful, dialectical, democratic process. As Dominic says, we discussed many other issues this morning, including India and Pakistan, where again we have worked very collaboratively, and we look forward to the discussions in the G8. Africa, and I commended the role which the Minister himself has played in respect of the early resolution of the terrible Côte d'Ivoire crisis, and we have seen it as our role to give every support to France in the region and in the United Nations. And we got on to European matters as well. Thank you very much. Very happy to take questions.
Comme nous avons assez peu de temps, il n'y aura pas, sauf demander express, de traduction simultanée, faute de quoi les questions seraient réduites à portion congrue.
Ma question s'adresse à M. Stroh. Monsieur le ministre, la France, l'Allemagne, la Russie et d'autres évoquent un rôle central pour l'ONU. Vous avez évoqué hier à Belfast un rôle vital pour l'ONU. Quelle différence entre rôle central et rôle vital?
What will it be?
It's a very good question. I think it's more or less the same. La même chose.
Minister Randa Takieddine Al-Hayat. Minister, I follow up on the question of my colleague. Would the vital role of the UN imply a commitment by the Americans to withdraw from Iraq as soon as the war has finished? Would that mean that the UN would take over the administration of post-Saddam Iraq? This is the French position as far as we know. What is your position and what is President Bush's position?
Well, let me just say that because I should have said it in my opening remarks, that we were very grateful for the welcome given by the French government for the conclusions from Hillsborough. Both we and the United States obviously wish to see as quickly as possible the creation of a representative democratic Iraqi government carrying the consent of its people, responsible crucially for its own security. That can't happen overnight, and in those circumstances, since the United States, United Kingdom forces are the reality on the ground in terms of providing security and stability over time, we have to remain there. It is our responsibility to stay there until these other processes are through. But do we want to see it as quickly as possible? Representative democratic government responsible for its own security? Of course.